Taf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis will begin Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, 12 lines from the bottom with the two dots. We learned in the Mishnah that the Chacham hold that if a Balabais is a partner with the other members of the Mavoi. There are different Chatzeres open them to a Mavoi, and he's partners with them with wine. So they Tanakama hold that the partners with wine, therefore that constitutes a shituf. The very fact that they join together, that they have an ownership together with wine, you can make a shituf mavuas with wine. So therefore, since they have a joint ownership with the wine, they do not have to make a separate shituf. That constitutes a shituf. But if it's with one with wine and the other one with oil, then they are not all merged and joined together, then you do have to make a special shituf. But Rosh Shimon says, he says, no, even in the case of wine and oil, they do not have to make a separate shituf. How can that be that Rosh Shimon holds that they don't need a separate shituf even if he partners with one with oil and one with wine? They're not all merged together. They're separate partnerships. So how can you say that it's a common shituf, that they're all now all merged together and joined together, that they can carry from the Chatzeres to the Mavoi? They're not all joined together. To have an Eruv, to have a shituf, they have to have all the participants all combined together. Here there's separate combinations. Rabba says, we're talking in a specific case over here, he says, with a chatzer between two mavuos, which we'll illustrate in a moment. Rosh Shimon says that if you have a case where you have three chatzeres that open to each other, and each one opens into the Rishus Harabim, so they don't have rights of way on each other. You have three separate chatzeres, they all have a Pesach between them. Three chatzeres, 1, 2, and 3, they're all joined together. They all have their separate entrance to the Rishus Harabim, so they don't walk through each other, but they're open to each other. So he says, Rosh Shimon says, in such a case, if the two outer ones made an Eruv with the middle ones, the middle one is mutter with each one of the side ones, but the two outer ones are also with each other. So, for instance, therefore, if you have a scenario where you have three chatzeres, you have middle one, middle one, and another outer one. So the two outer ones, they made their separate Eruv with the middle ones. The middle one is joined with the one on this side, and the middle one is joined on this side. So the middle one can carry from their house over here, from their chatzer to the chatzer on this side, and from this chatzer to the chatzer on that side, because they have their own separate Eruvim. But the two outer ones cannot carry from this chatzer to this chatzer. They are not joined together, even though they're joined each one with the middle one. So the middle one is mutter with each one, but the ones on the sides are also with each other. So that's the case Rosh Shimon was talking about with a chatzer. So that's what we're talking with the chatzer. Now we're applying from that case. We're applying that case to our case of a Mavoi. So we're extrapolating from that case and making it relevant to our case of a Mavoi. As the Taisus points out, that case is talking about chatzeres. We're talking over here about wine and oil. You can't make a Eruv chatzeres with wine and oil. We're talking by mavuos, not by Eruv chatzeres. We're talking about shituf mavuos. But nevertheless, we're extrapolating from that case of chatzeres to our case over here of Mavoi, and therefore have a similar scenario to this case of a Mavoi. As the Gemara said, that we're talking about The case is, he's saying that so it's a chaser between two mavuis. So, for instance, if you have there's a chaser here in the middle. This is one chaser. It has an entranceway to each side street. There's a mavui here, and there is a mavui over here. So there are two chatzeres open to this mavui, and there's two chatzeres open to this mavui. So you have the mavuis, and assume over here that you have a wall back here. So you have a mavui over here. You have a mavui over here. It's open to the Rishus Rabbim. There's a Pesach here, and there's a Pesach here. This middle one is open on each side. So it's very similar to the case of the three chatzeres when you have a middle chatzer and a chatzer on each side. So then Rav Shimon said that the middle chatzer, he made an eruv with the chatzer on this side and mutter on that side, and this one on this side. So similarly in the case of the mavui. So what are we talking about over here? When we say that one was with oil and one was with wine, we're talking about in a case similar to this, where this chatzer has a partnership with the people on this side, let's say, with wine. So this is considered a shituf. He's mutter to carry from his chatzer to the mavui, and they as well, because they're joined together. Let's say that the partnership on this side is with oil. So therefore they're mutter to carry in the mavui over here, because they're all joined together. Now from here to here, they can't carry through here, because this mavui is not joined with this one. But the middle one can carry with each side, because the middle one is joined on both sides. So from the middle they can carry to, this is considered a separate shituf, and this is considered a separate shituf. They can carry from their chatzeres to this mavui. They can carry from their chatzeres to this mavui. But the ones from here on the sides cannot carry from one to the other, similar to the case that Rav Shimon said by the case of chatzeres. So therefore, we're making this analogy. We're talking specifically in this type of a case. That's where Rav Shimon says that even though the eruv is with one with wine and one with oil, but they're two separate. They're considered two separate shitufim, and on one side it's a shituf with the oil, on one side it's a shituf with wine. Yeah. Amalei Abaye objects to this. Amalei Abaye midami. Hasam ketani shtayim begatzonis asuras. Over there it says, by the case of the chatzeres, that the two outer ones are also with each other. But over here it says that they don't have to make an eruv, so it's not much that they're also with each other, so there's no need for an eruv. So if it's talking in this scenario, in this case, which the Rava suggests that we're talking in this case, and it brings the analogy to the case of the chatzeres, why should it say ain't tzrichem la'arev? Why do you mean they don't have to make an eruv? In order to carry from one side mavui to the other mavui, you need an eruv. It's over here. We're just saying that the each one on its own, the middle with each side each side is mutter. This mavui is mutter. One mavui is mutter because they have their shituf. The other mavui, the chatzeres that are open to the other mavui, are also mutter because they have a shituf. But it's over here it says Ein Tzrichem La'arev Klal, which means there's no need to make an eruv, which is mashma that even from the side ones, from one mavui to the other one, you don't need an eruv. Where it says no, my Ein Tzrichem La'arev means Shchein B'Harav Alabayis. Shchein B'Harav Yadar Tzrichem La'arev. What it means is there's no need to make an eruv, a shituf. There's no need to make the shituf is from one side to the middle. That's where there's no need. There's no need to make a shituf from the chatzeres with the middle one. There's no need to with the balabais. There's no need to, because there's automatically a shituf because of their partnership. And similarly, over here, there's no need to make a shituf with the middle one because of their partnership. They have a partnership with oil, they have a partnership with wine, but they each have their separate partnerships. There's no need to make a shituf because they're automatically joined together. But from this malvai to this malvai, there would be a need to make a shituf. But that's not what's being discussed over here. That's what it means. So that's the way that Rava is learning it. So he says, Rav Yosef Omar, he has a different shot. He's saying, we're not talking about where there's two mavois and there's a middle chotzer and there's a two mavois on each side and we're talking about two separate shitufim. No, we're not talking about that case. He said, Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Shimon, Rabbanan, Beplukta, Rav Yechid ben Nur, Rabbanan Kamiflagi. We're talking about one movi. And as we understood to begin with, we're talking about a simpler case. It's one movi. And the issue is, can you have with the partnership of wine and oil, can that be considered to be a shituf? What's the issue over here? The issue over here is that when we have the wine it's a shituf with wine. So we had a machlokes Rav and Abaya. Does the wine have to be in one container? Can it be in two separate containers? Whether it's roy to mix together or not. Now, in the case of the oil, what we're talking about is, in the case of the oil, is with wine and oil in a single container, is that considered to be one item? If they're put together in one barrel, is it similar to wine and wine? That you put wine in a barrel, you put other wine in a barrel, it's all one. It's all considered to be one homogeneous matter. It's considered to be all one item. And therefore there's a shituf, and therefore it's all merged together. Do we say the same thing by wine and oil? Now they're two liquids, but they're two separate liquids, and the oil floats on the top. Do we say if the wine and the oil are considered to be in one container, are they considered to be one, or are they considered to be separate? And that's a machlokes Rav Yechid ben Nur and Rabbanan, and we're applying that machlokes to this case over here. So Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Shimon, Rabbanan Beplukta, Rav Yechid ben Nur, Rabbanan Kamiflagi. They argue on the same machlokes. This nan shemen shetzaf al gabe yayin. If you have oil that's floating on top of wine, v'naga atful yom b'shemen, and atful yom he touched the shemen. Atful yom is a person who was tamei. He went to the mikveh, but he didn't have hair of shemes yet. So even though he went to the mikveh, and it takes off most of the truma, but he's not completely toar. And if he touched truma prior to nightfall, then he passes the truma. He makes that truma pas, not tome. It cannot transmit the truma further, but it itself is tome. So at full yom, if he touches a truma, he will passel it. Now let's say you have oil on top, floating on top of wine, and he touched the oil. Is it considered like he touched the wine as well? So, for instance, if you have a barrel of wine, the Tvul Yom touch the surface of it. It's not just the surface that's tamei, that's possible. It's the whole barrel, all the contents of the barrel possible. It's one item. It's like if a person touched the Tvul Yom, a piece of bread. It's not just the point of contact that is possible. It's one item, and therefore the whole item, the entire item, is possible. Here, if it's a barrel of wine, he touched the surface of the wine, it's all possible. What about if he touched the oil floating on the wine? Do we look at the oil and wine, do we view them independently, and we say he touched the oil and not the wine? Or do we look at it like it's a barrel of wine? He touched the surface, it's all possible. So that's the machlokes over there. So we say that sheman shetzaf al gabe yayin v'nagat tfulim b'shemen loy pasol l'shem b'lvad. The Rabbanan say that we view them as two separate items, and therefore he only pasol the shemen, not the wine. So it's not considered to be all together, all one. But he says no, it's all considered to be one. He touched the oil, and therefore he passes not only the oil, but the wine as well. So similarly, we're applying that machlokes to the case over here, and do we say that the oil and the wine can we view them as being one item, and therefore you have a valid shituf with it? Rabbanan ki Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold like the Rabbanan legabi that machlokes, and therefore we view wine and oil as separate items, and therefore you cannot have a shituf between the two because they're not one item. So, and they're not right to be one item. Rabbi Shimon, Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, and Rav Shimon holds like Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, and he holds that we do view them as one item, and therefore you can have a shituf with oil and with wine, because if they're together in one barrel, they're considered to be as one. So this is the machlokes that we had in our Mishnah, whether you can make a shituf with oil and wine, but they both agree, both Rabbanan and Shimon agree that with wine you could have a valid shituf. Tanya, we learn in the Brisa, we learn an opinion that argues on the Tanoim of our Mishnah. Tanya, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy, he says, he says, no, in both cases, it's not considered a valid shituf. They have to make their own independent shituf. Just because they're partners, it's not considered to be a valid shituf. You mean to say, even if they're partners with wine, why do they need a separate shituf if they're partners with wine? So therefore they should be considered to be all one, and it should be considered to be an automatic shituf. Rabba says, he says, if they're all partners together in wine, now they all join together. So what's the basis of the partnership? The basis of the partnership is, okay, so A, Chaser 1, takes a container of a jug of wine and he pours it into their common barrel. And B does the same thing, and C does the same thing. So that's mamish a shituf. Now, even though they didn't do it to begin with the intention to be a shituf, even though their kavanah was not to begin with for the purpose of shituf, it was for a partnership, but nevertheless, it's still valid for a shituf because, in effect, it has the same result, the same tzaitzah as a shituf. They all contributed wine in a common barrel. That's a shituf. So if they each took a jug of wine, poured it in a barrel, that is in effect a shituf. They all brought their wine together, they brought their food together in a common area, so it's memela shituf. So that wouldn't be the machlokes. What is a machlokes? Where does Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy argue? He says, where the partnership was joined together, it was initiated not with wine, with money. They all pooled money together. So the coming together of the chatzeros, the coming together of the partnership is not with wine. It's with money. Now you can't make a shituf with money. You have to have it with food. So their partnership was formed with money. And then they initiated with money, and so they took the money and they bought, in a partnership, they bought a barrel of wine. So Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy sover ein breyer. He holds ein breyer. Now, so therefore, we view the merging together, we view the joining together over here as a joining together with money. Now, even though they subsequently used the money to buy wine, but the coming together over here was a joining together with money. And it wasn't a joining together with yayin, so you can't view it as a shituf. Even though they're all partners with wine, but you cannot view it as a shituf because they did not join together with wine. He holds ein breyer. Now, as Taisus explains, this is not the typical understanding of breira when we say Hoover Dover Lamafreya. Retroactively, we view it as that their ownership was always with this to begin with. It's used in a loose manner, the word of brera, meaning it says, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy says, since the partnership was initially formed with money, even though later the second stage over it was they bought wine with it, but we have to view this as a coming to join together with money and not with wine. Rabbanan Savre, Yesh Brera, and the Rabbanan hold Yesh Brera. What does it mean, Yesh Brera? They say, but since ultimately it was used for wine, we have a de facto partnership, a de facto shituf rather, are joining together with wine. They all own the wine together, and that's enough to view this as a partnership of wine that they join together with wine. And therefore, we can view it as a shituf. That's one explanation of the machlokes between our Tanoim and Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy. That's Rav's explanation. Rav Yosef Omar, Rav Yosef gives a completely different explanation of the machlokes of Rav Elazar ben Tadoy and the Chachamim. He says that ein chanami, as far as the shituf is concerned, if they're partners, if they're shutfim with yayin, it is a valid shituf. He's not arguing on that. Their machlokes is something entirely different. The machlokes is whether the shituf, if you have a valid shituf, do you also need an erev in the chatzeres? Do you need a eruv chatzeres to carry from one chatzer to another chatzer, or perhaps, according to some Rishonim, from the house to the chatzer? That's the machlokes. It's not whether the shituf is valid; it's whether the shituf is valid for the erev chatzeres. So he says, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy Rabbanan, and b'seimpim al shituf b'malkam erev kam miflagi. The shaila is, can you rely on the shituf to replace the erev, and say that therefore you do not need erev chatzeres? Demar sovereign seimchem. Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy says you cannot. You need a separate erev chatzeres. Umar sover seimchem. And the Rabbanan hold, if you have a valid shituf, then you don't need erev chatzeres. Omar of Yosef min Aminallah. What's my riot? That's the machlokes, that's what they're arguing with. He says the halacha is like Ramer that says that a shituf cannot replace erev chatzeres. Now Rav said, he said the halacha is like Rav Elazar ben Tadoy, and he also said the halacha is Ramer. Now, my time, why does Rav say paskin like both of them? La mishum d'chad taimu. It must be because they're both based on the same tam. As the Ritva explains, Rav would not paskin like two das yochid, and certainly not by Eruvin, would not paskin like two das yochid l'chumra. So why is he paskining both like Reb Meir, which is a chumra, and Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy? Must be that they're really based on the same reasoning. So, well, if it's really the same, based on the same reason, and it's the same inyan, that you can't rely on a shituf to replace erev chatzeres, so why paskin like both? Just say one, if it's one and the same. The reason why he has to tell me that the halacha is both like Rameir and Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy is because teach me the principle that we don't follow two chumras for one tana. We don't follow a single tana when it involves two chumras. Now, even though the principle of Rameir, Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy, is based on the same principle that you cannot be ma'arav, the shituf is not valid for an erev chatzeres, but there are two chumras involved over here. One is that the wine used for a shituf cannot be valid for erev chatzeres, and secondly, even if the shituf was done with pas, and where pas is valid for erev chatzeres, wine is not kosher for erev chatzeres, but pas is. The second chiddush is that even where pas is used for the shituf, that also is not valid for the erev chatzeres. So first, the Rav has to tell me that the halach is Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoy that a shituf of wine is not valid for chatzeres. Then he tells me that on top of that, like the halach is like Rameir, that even if the shituf is with pas, it's also not valid. So therefore, even though it's the same general principle that the shituf does not work for, it's not valid for the Eruv Chatzeres, but there are two separate chumras here, and we are taught the principle that we don't do like two chumras, we don't follow two chumras in one Tana, so it says halacha is like both of them, to teach me that not only where the shituf was with wine is not valid for the Eruv Chatzeres, even where the shituf was with pas, or pas itself is kosher for Eruv Chatzeres, that's what you use for Eruv Chatzeres. Nevertheless, if it was used for the shituf, it's not valid for the Chatzer. My Rabbanan, where is this machlekes Rameir Rabbanan? This time we learned in the Brayso, Ma'arvin b'Chatzeres b'pas. What you use for Eruv Chatzeres, you use pras, bread. V'im ratzalav b'yayin ein ma'arv. Wine is not valid, is not kosher. Mishtafim b'movoi b'yayin. Shituf is valid with wine. You could use wine for shituf m'vois. V'im ratzul ishtat b'pas mishtafim, but you can also use pas. Ma'arvin b'Chatzeres, you make a erev in a Chatzeres. So in order to permit carrying from one Chatzer to another, if they're open to each other, you make an erev marv chatzeres, and that allows you to carry from one to the other. Umishtafim b'movi. But in addition to that, you also have to make a sheet of mavois. Shaloi l'shachar teres erev min hatinaikas, so that the tinaikas will not forget. If you don't make both, then they'll think that you don't need both. So therefore, this is the sheet of Rav Meir, and therefore, you have to make, even though there's a shituf, you need Erev Chatzeres. In Erev Chatzeres, you need a shituf. Shaloi shakra teres erev min hatinaikas sheyemra v'seinu lo yerevu. Because if you don't, they might say, the children, the future generations might say, well, we remember that there was no Erev Chatzeres, so therefore you need both. Divrei Rav Meir. That's what Rav Meir says, that therefore the one is not valid for the other. Shaloi shakra tinaikas, even though there's a shituf, you need Erev Chatzeres as well. But they say no, you don't need both. If you make an erev with the chatzeres are all ma'ariv together, you don't need a shituf. If there's a shituf where they're all mishatav together in the malva, you don't need separate erev chatzeres. This is the machlokes Rav Meir and Chachamim.